like black chewing gum squished onto the bottom of it between these two legs in the back. Otherwise, in the normal season, if you take the male lobster and you flip it over, it'll have two little things that look like belly buttons. At the base of this leg, on both sides, it'll have two little things that look like belly buttons, and the female just basically doesn't have that. If you see it once, next time you get a lobster, you flip it over and look at it. If it's a female, you'll think, I wonder if that's right. But then you get another one, you flip it over and it's a male, and you think, oh, that's what it's supposed to look like. The question was, does a lobster take a year to mature? That's actually really quick in anything. Some of the fastest fish that you'll find are still more than a year old before they're to a size that would be worth harvesting. Lobster from the egg stage going up into the plankton and swimming around as a planktonic little character, that can take up to a year. Before they even decide to become a lobster and sort of molt and work their way down into the reef and start doing lobster stuff and even look like a lobster, that can take a year. So a lobster this long can be a year old, and then you get sort of 2 years old, 3 years old before it gets to a point where you can harvest it. And depending on where you are, you're not even guaranteed that a lobster would have a 3-inch carapace. When I say carapace, that's this part here. So the 3 inches needs to be from right there at the back to the front of these horns. That 3-inch carapace lobster may not even be sexually mature yet. Which is a bit of a worry. No. 3 years would be about it. But, for a small one. But a big one, you might be looking at 10 or 12 years. That's a really big one, though. Yeah, and then you hear stories about ones in California and off the coast of Maine and so on being over 100. But those tend to be different. Those are different species in colder water.
Size between a male and a female.
They say that the males are supposed to get bigger, but I haven't read anything about it. I think you just naturally refer to a large lobster as a male. And they are sort of territorial, so it makes sense that the males be bigger, but I haven't read anything about it. I think when you get into, if there was going to be a size difference between the two sexes, it would be once they're big, and then that starts to become a difference. There shouldn't really be any difference. If anything, it takes a lot of energy to produce eggs. It's very difficult to produce eggs, which means that requires metabolism of stored fats and blood tissues and all that kind of thing. So the males should be tastier because the females are investing all this extra energy. And in fact, the males should be bigger because the females are investing all this extra energy. Is it possible to raise and harvest your own lobster from egg? Not from egg. Well, it would be, because you can hatch the eggs artificially in like a fish tank situation, but it's incredibly difficult to go from the hatched egg to the settling larva, because you're dealing with anywhere from 6 to 12 months for that to happen. That you have to take care of them, you have to feed them, you have to keep them clean, you have to keep them out of trouble. And in that circumstance, you're still, naturally, you have 1% survival, right? Which means if you take 1,000 eggs and you put them in there, you get 10 surviving. You don't get very much back. Everything's wild, yeah. At least here. There are people in the world who are taking, not the eggs from the mature female, and they're not breeding them the whole way through their life cycle and then breeding them again. They're taking after a year, you get a baby, what looks almost like a baby lobster starting to settle out, right? They're catching those, they're harvesting those as they come out, and then putting those into an aquaculture situation and trying to raise them from that. Depends what you're trying to do. Depends where you're going to do it. If you're going to do it in hatchery ponds where you pumped your own water in, then it'd be a lot of investment. You got a lot of time invested in making them grow.
So on your point of view, don't you think that's a good idea? So take lobster, harvest them, so it wouldn't be so bad, right?
I don't. Now, to say that the lobster's not going to go extinct anytime particularly soon. There's still a few of them out there. But having said that, we don't fully understand where they're coming from or what they're doing. They're spending a year floating around. So the lobster that we're catching out here could have been born in Hispaniola, it could have been born in Haiti or Cuba, or probably even further than that. Is it a good idea? Yeah. Would it be economically feasible? Probably. But you'd almost have to wait for the lobster prices to get more. Is that a reasonable sidestep? Is that a reasonable thing to say, well, we're doing this so we don't have to manage the wild stocks anymore? No. We still have to take responsibility for the wild stocks that are existing out there. You can't just say, well, they're extinct anyway, we're going to grow them and do this. The other thing about it is, if you're collecting babies as they're settling out, juvenile lobsters as they're settling out, you still have to have adult lobsters a year upstream in order to collect them from. So somebody upstream has now still got to pay attention to what they're doing with their lobsters for you to be able to continue to collect in order to grow and sell. So there's a lot of pieces to that pie. Can you crossbreed lobsters, spiny lobster to Maine lobster? You mean trying to get like a Maine lobster thing with the big claws living in tropical waters down here? They're really not very closely related. So it would be a huge stretch. You'd need some real Frankenstein circumstances going on to make it happen. But you can, well, like with anything, you can selectively breed them to do what you want them to do to a certain extent. The difference is, again, you don't have that kind of control. You haven't got a lobster that you can breed and get eggs from and raise those eggs, see what they're going to look like, and then choose the two parents to breed together in order to go to the next step. Because the baby lobsters, it takes them a year to go from egg to even settling juvenile. They're spending a year in the plankton, which you need to take into account with anything that you do like that. For things like that, to have more control, you've got lots and lots of shrimp and freshwater lobster species to deal with, where you haven't got that kind of headache. You've got sort of much shorter settling times, if any settling time at all, and it's a whole lot more control. And there are people working in freshwater lobster, coming up with giant versions, ones that taste a little different, and ones that have soft shells. So that's the easier way to go. Be reminded that the first Thursday of every month we do put these sort of presentations on. Thank you very much, and good night.